Hello Year 8, time for a quick video from me podcast about energy so you can help revise for the upcoming test. So first of all, we looked at energy and fuels. So fuels are just a store of energy. So, things like fossil fuels, that's gas, coal and oil, nuclear fuels and wood, straw and even rubbish. We can burn those things as fuels and make energy. Okay, for example, the light, heat, electric, sound, cars, motion, chemical energy, all those things are examples of energy. The process of making energy is very important. So first of all, you boil water to make steam. This steam turns a turbine. This turbine is next to a generator, which inside contains an electromagnet inside a coil of wire. And when the turbine spins, the magnet spins too. And that gives electricity to the wire, which can be carried away in cables. So basically, things are burnt to produce the steam to start that process off. But it hasn't got to be burnt either. It can be hydroelectric things. For example, water can cause this. And also wind can do it too. And yes, wind farms, the wind spins them by turning the blades. In the sea, waves and the tide can make the turbine spin. And the electricity that's made by this can be fed into the national grid. That's basically the network of cables that carry electric around the UK. Some things are renewable and some things are not. So renewable energy is energy that is going to last forever and can be used over and over and over again. For example, the wind, the sun, water. But some things are non-renewable, like oil, coal, gas, fossil fuels, because eventually they are going to run out. Okay, and we looked at some questions on that on page 83 if you want to revise. Then we looked at energy and fuels. So the definition of a fossil fuel is a fossil fuel comes from compressed fossils over many years, becoming oil, coal and gas, which can be used as a fuel for energy. And I set you a homework to look at renewable energy in particular. So fossil fuels, coal, crude oil and natural gas. And ultimately, we do depend on them for electricity of lights and charging your phones and factories to make our items and petrol and diesel and getting our cars and buses, cooking. But even shampoo and shower gel and plastic things are made with oil. So we depend on them. And the trouble is, these have impacts on our environment, like global warming and other damage to the environment, acid rain, other pollutants, and even more. There's also problems with supply. There's lots of war going out about it, and also we're running out of resources. So over 100 countries have no oil of their own, for example. So that means they're relying on other places. And then also, to add to the problem, there's money issues too. The world's using more and more fossil fuels every day, but there's more and more people. So ultimately, prices of food, clothing, electric and petrol, and train and bus fares are going up. So the idea would be, is it time to turn the fossil fuels off and go to renewables, or are we ready for that yet? That's the question. Then we looked at nuclear power and about how nuclear power, ultimately, it's basically just a metal compound in nuclear fuel. You have an unstable atom, it splits into two smaller atoms, it breaks down to radiation, and this gives out a huge amount of energy which we can harvest and use. So it has some good things, it has some bad things. It ultimately has, a really good amount of power, and it's no carbon dioxide, so it's better for the environment, and there's less waste. However, it's very dangerous. A big blast of it will even kill you. But also the waste material from nuclear reaction is so radioactive it can remain dangerous for hundreds of years, as we saw in Chernobyl. So countries like the UK have a disaster, have a big decision to not maybe have disasters and try and save it a little bit. And then the final lesson of the topic is about green energy. So we looked about renewables, biofuels. They're liquids made from plant material that we use for fuel for cars. Ethanol is a good example of this. Obviously, this has knock-on effects on growing plants, because you can grow plants for food, but maybe it's better financially to use the food for fuel. Corn being an example of a case study for this. So yes, ethanol contains carbon, so it does give out CO2, but they call it a carbon neutral fuel because the amount of carbon dioxide given off in the process is absorbed again by the plant through photosynthesis, so it kind of reacts well to itself. And ultimately, people are going to be using biofuels more and more and more. Okay, we had an example of biofuels in the USA and how it has good and bad knock-on effects depending on where you are. But then also other renewable energy is solar panels and PV cells, and about how they can be used maybe as a bit of a cleaner one. Because more and more people are using clean energy around the world. And that is the topic. You had the questions on page 93, questions 5, 6 and 7 for your homework. But ultimately use the slides to help you revise this topic. See you later.